My name is Luna Flores, and this is the part of my life I spent years trying not to look at. But life has a strange way of pushing you back into memories you thought were buried, sometimes softly, sometimes violently. My story begins on a quiet Thursday morning, at 6:14 a.m. to be exact, when I received a phone call that felt like someone had pulled the floor out from underneath me. But before I tell you what happened on that call, you need to understand something. I never imagined my own stepmother would try to erase me, not just from my father's heart, but from his legacy, his world, and the very life he built before she even existed. And I definitely never expected the person who would open my eyes to the truth would be the butler who had served our family since I was 8 years old. But let me not jump too far ahead. Revenge stories don't start with revenge. They start with a small shift. A moment when you realize something that once felt safe is suddenly unfamiliar. And for me, that moment began years ago, but I ignored it. Or maybe I convinced myself it was nothing, just to keep my heart from breaking. My father, Victor Flores, wasn't the kind of billionaire people imagine from movies. No yachts with loud parties, no gold-plated everything, no flashing cameras. He was more like a quiet storm, steady, powerful, and mostly invisible. He built his empire in real estate, buying broken things and giving them new life. Maybe that's why I loved him so much. He believed nothing was too damaged to be rebuilt. And maybe that's also why losing him, or thinking I lost him, hurt the way it did. Growing up, it was just the two of us after my mother passed away. I was 12, and he was trying to learn how to braid hair and pack school lunches while signing million-dollar contracts. Imagine a man in a tailored navy suit standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m. holding a pancake spatula like it was a foreign object. That was my dad. I remember once he burned the edges of my breakfast so badly that the fire alarm went off, and we both ended up laughing on the kitchen floor, eating cereal straight from the box because it was the only thing we couldn't destroy. Moments like that felt like a warm coat in winter, thick and comforting. I held on to them for a long time. I didn't know how cold things would become. When I turned 14, Evelyn walked into our lives. She was everything my father wasn't. Glittering where he was grounded, loud where he was quiet, and polished where he was simple. Her smile looked perfect from far away, but the closer she came, the more that smile felt like something she wore, not something she felt. I didn't dislike her at first. I didn't even notice her, honestly. She wasn't rude, she wasn't dramatic, she wasn't anything. She just hovered, a little too close to my father's shoulder, a little too often in the hallways, a little too perfect when she greeted guests. But over time, the air in the house began to change. I started feeling like I was a guest in my own home, like the rooms I grew up in weren't mine anymore, like my childhood laughter didn't echo in the walls the same way. I would walk into the dining room and feel conversations freeze. I would enter the library and find books misplaced, books my mother once touched. I would walk into the kitchen and see her replacing ingredients my father and I used when we cooked together. It was subtle, soft, almost invisible, but it was there. Distance planted like a seed. And my father, busy and tired and trying to hold his world together, never noticed the way the roots were spreading. By the time I was 18, I felt like I was breathing through a window instead of inside the room. My father and I still loved each other, don't get me wrong, but something delicate had cracked, and we didn't know how to repair it. When I went to college, Evelyn hugged me at the door, and for the first time, I felt her hands on my back and realized she was not hugging me. She was patting me away. That's the only way to describe it, a soft push disguised as affection. But I didn't understand that then. I didn't understand many things then. As I grew older, 22, 27, 30, my relationship with my father slowly thinned out, like a ribbon being stretched too far. We still talked, we still visited each other, but each year the visits got shorter, the calls got rarer, the messages felt colder. I didn't know why, and I didn't suspect Evelyn because she was always gentle around me. Too gentle, like someone handling a vase they planned to knock over when no one was watching. But the truth? I thought the distance meant my father was fading away from me, that maybe I wasn't enough, that maybe I didn't deserve more. That was the lie I told myself until the morning everything changed. It was exactly 6:14 a.m. I remember because I wasn't awake yet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and at first I ignored it. But then it buzzed again, and something inside me said, "Pick it up, now." When I answered, the voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in years. Deep, calm, steady. The kind of voice that carried secrets without ever raising its volume. It was Mr. Hale, the butler who had been with my family since before I was even born. "Miss Luna," he said, and hearing him use that name again sent a strange warmth through my chest. "Forgive me for calling at this hour, but I need you to listen carefully." My heart tightened. I sat up slowly, sliding my feet onto the cold floor, trying to shake off the fog of sleep. "Is it my father?" I asked. There was a pause. A long one. Long enough for dread to climb my throat. "Your father is stable," he finally said. "But things are complicated." "Complicated how?" Another pause. "Miss Luna, there have been decisions made in your absence. Decisions you did not approve. Decisions you were not told about." I felt a pulse of confusion. "What decisions?" "Involving the will," he said quietly, "and your position within it." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. Mr. Hale inhaled slowly, like he was preparing to cross a line he never wanted to cross. "He believes that you have been intentionally kept away, that someone has controlled what you hear and what your father hears." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Someone," I repeated. "Who?" When he answered, his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Your stepmother, Miss Luna." My heart froze. Completely. There was a rustling sound on the other end, as if he was checking to make sure no one was listening. He added, "There is more, much more, and you deserve to know it." I swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Come to the estate, today, quietly. I will meet you at the old garden gate at noon." "Why the garden gate?" I asked, confused. His answer made goosebumps rise along my arms. "Because," he said softly, "it is the only place in the house without cameras. She made sure of that." And with that, he hung up. I sat there in silence, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. My mind felt like it was spinning out of control. Questions, memories, confusion, fear. The will? Kept away? Controlled access? Hidden from my own father? Why would Evelyn do that? What did she want? What had she already done? And more importantly, what was my father going through without me knowing? A part of me wanted to ignore everything, crawl back into bed and pretend none of this existed. But something deep inside me, something fierce and tired and done being silent, finally woke up. I stood. I packed a bag. I got into my car. And I drove back toward the home where everything started. Toward the truth. Toward the betrayal. Toward the secret that had been waiting behind those walls for years. At that moment, I didn't know that this was the beginning of the most painful and powerful chapter of my life. I didn't know this was the day I would learn what she hid and how far she was willing to go to erase me. All I knew was this. Someone had tried to rewrite my story, and I was going back to take the pen out of their hands. When I drove through the long road leading to my father's estate, Memories rushed toward me like waves hitting a shore that had forgotten what water felt like. The tall oak trees that lined the driveway were still there, their branches arching above the road like a tunnel of time. I had walked this path thousands of times as a child, barefoot, chasing fireflies, laughing with my father as he pretended to lose every race on purpose. But now, as I inched closer to the mansion, each tree felt like it was watching me, whispering the years I had missed, or the years that had been taken from me. Before I could face whatever awaited me inside, I needed to go back in my mind, to the years when everything began. Because betrayal never arrives suddenly. It grows, quietly, in small moments, almost invisible, until the day it becomes impossible to ignore. My earliest memories of my father are soft ones. Warm hands holding mine while crossing the street. His deep voice reading bedtime stories. His eyes, always gentle, even when tired. After my mother passed away, the house changed, yes, but not in the way people expect. It didn't become cold, it became quiet. Like someone had turned down the volume on life itself. Dad tried. He really did. He tried to make pancakes on Sundays even though they always came out uneven. He tried to learn how to do hair braids from YouTube videos and somehow always twisted them too tight. He tried to be both parents, even though grief weighed on him like a thick winter blanket. But even with all that trying, the house still felt incomplete. I remember nights where I would see him sitting alone in the living room, staring at old pictures of my mother. His face would soften with memories and then fold into sadness. Sometimes he would whisper her name, thinking I couldn't hear. I heard everything. I was 12, learning how to be strong because I thought he needed me to be. But inside, I was just a girl missing her mother so deeply it hurt to breathe sometimes. When Evelyn arrived, she didn't knock loudly. She slid into our lives like someone slipping a letter under a door. Quiet, smooth, almost unnoticed. She met my father at a business event. She was polished. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect timing. Everything about her looked carefully arranged, like she had rehearsed her entire existence. My father wasn't ready to let anyone in, but Evelyn didn't wait for permission. She simply found the cracks in our life and stepped through them. I remember the first time I saw her. She was standing in the foyer, wearing a beige silk dress that draped around her like light. Her smile was wide, warm, and hollow in a way I couldn't explain then. She bent down slightly and said, "Oh, you must be Luna. I've heard so much about you." The way she said my name felt wrong. Too sweet, too practiced. But I was 14, and I wanted things to get better, not worse. So I smiled back, and that was enough for her to slip deeper into our world. At first, she stayed in the background, helping decorate the house, organizing little dinner parties, bringing fresh flowers into rooms that smelled too much like the past. My father seemed lighter around her, like someone had opened a window in a dusty room. I wanted to like her. I wanted her to be someone who made our world brighter. And for a while, I believed she did. But shadows don't show themselves immediately. They wait. The first sign came in small things. I would walk into a room and conversations would suddenly shift. Quiet looks between her and the house staff. Whispers that weren't there before. She started joining the moments that used to be just me and my dad. If I planned to cook dinner with him, she would inform the kitchen staff to handle it. If I wanted to watch a movie, she would accidentally schedule a charity event. If I wanted to talk to him privately, she would remind him of calls he needed to return. It wasn't obvious. Not at first. It was slow, soft. A gentle push that kept nudging me out of the space I once belonged in. There was one moment I will never forget. I had saved up my allowance to buy my father a watch for his birthday. A simple black leather one, nothing fancy, but full of love. When I gave it to him, he smiled, hugged me, and said he loved it. The next day, it was gone. When I asked him about it, he said, confused, "Oh, didn't you say you wanted to return it? That it wasn't the right one?" My heart sunk. I never said that. He looked puzzled. "Oh, Evelyn told me you said it didn't fit the way you imagined." I didn't know what to say. I felt something tighten in my chest, like I had been pushed back into a corner I didn't even see. She smiled at me that day, and for the first time I realized her smile wasn't warm. It was ownership. Over the next few years, she became the architect of the distance between me and my father. When I got sick in college, I called home, but my father never called back. When I asked him why he didn't respond, he said, "Honey, Evelyn told me you didn't want to worry me. She said you were fine." I wasn't fine. I had spent a night in the emergency room. During school breaks, I would fly home and sometimes find out he was too busy to see me, only to learn later he had been in the house the entire time. When I went to his office to surprise him on his birthday, the secretary said he wasn't there. I left a gift anyway. 3 weeks later, I learned from Mr. Hale that my father had never been told I visited. Every time I tried to get closer, something invisible pushed me back. But I didn't see the pattern then. I blamed myself. I blamed timing. I blamed life. I never once blamed her. Not let. When I turned 31, everything escalated. My father fell ill. Nothing dramatic, but enough that he needed rest, medication, and support. Evelyn stepped fully into the role of caregiver. And I stepped out, without meaning to. Phone calls became filtered. "Your father is resting. Your father is in a meeting. Your father is too tired today. He'll call you tomorrow. He's sleeping right now. He doesn't want to be disturbed." Sometimes I heard his voice in the background, fine, awake, yet she told me he was sleeping. Sometimes I called the house line and it rang endlessly, only for someone to hurriedly answer and say, "He can't talk now." I started driving to the mansion unannounced, but somehow Evelyn always appeared at the door before I even reached the porch. She'd smile politely and say, "Oh, Luna, what a sweet surprise. Unfortunately, Victor just stepped out." Every single time. It became eerie, like she had sensors tracking my location. I would catch glimpses of my father through windows, talking to gardeners, drinking tea, reading newspapers, completely fine, completely unaware I was even there. She made sure of it. And the worst part? I thought my father didn't want to see me. I didn't know she was controlling everything, filtering my messages, redirecting my calls, deleting my voicemails, and throwing away the letters I sent. She wasn't just creating distance. She was rewriting reality. There was one night I came home for a holiday dinner. I was excited, nervous, hopeful, thinking maybe things would be better. But when I walked in, the table was set for 2, not 3. Evelyn looked genuinely startled. "Oh, you came?" she said, as if I was the unexpected stranger. My father looked confused too. "I didn't know you were visiting tonight, honey. I texted you and emailed you." He frowned. "I never got anything." I looked at Evelyn. She gave me that same soft smile, the one that never reached her eyes. "We must have had a mix-up," she said lightly. A mix-up. A mix-up that had been happening consistently for nearly a decade. That night when I hugged my father goodbye, something inside me felt heavy, like a chain pulling from my chest. I didn't know what it was then. Later, I would realize it was the weight of being slowly erased. The distance between us became normal. At least, that's what I forced myself to believe. I told myself, he's busy. He's tired. He's getting older. He has a new life. He doesn't need me the way he used to. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I felt the truth long before I saw it. Someone was controlling the space between us. Someone was managing his world with such elegance that he didn't even notice what he was losing. Someone was slowly, quietly painting me out of the picture. I just didn't know the full extent. Not until the butler's call, not until the truth began cracking through the lies, not until the day my father's will was changed without my knowledge. For years, I had lived with a growing ache inside me, thinking I had somehow failed my father. Only later, much later, would I understand that the failure wasn't mine. It belonged to the person who had stood beside him for all these years, wearing perfection like a mask. The woman who didn't just want a place in his world, she wanted the whole world for herself. And to do that, she needed to get rid of one thing first: me. When I reached the estate that morning, I didn't go inside. I parked the car near the old stone fountain, the same one my mother used to toss pennies into and whisper wishes she never told anyone. The water was still, almost glass-like, as if even the fountain was holding its breath. But before I faced the truth waiting inside those walls, my mind traveled back 3 years. To the moment everything changed. To the moment my father's illness became the perfect door for Evelyn to step through and close behind her. My father had always been strong, not in the showy, loud way, but in the quiet way. He carried stress the way people carry jackets. Always on, barely noticeable. But even the strongest edges soften with time. He was 68 when the first signs appeared. He would forget where he placed his glasses. He would retell stories he'd already told earlier in the day. He would pause mid-sentence, searching for a word that slipped away before he could catch it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. Just small cracks in a foundation that had held steady for decades. I remember the first time I truly noticed. We were having lunch at a cafe he loved, one with old brick walls, wooden tables, and a view of the river that always made him sigh with contentment. He asked the waiter for the Tuesday special. The waiter looked confused. "Sir, today is Sunday." My father blinked, then laughed it off. "Oh, of course, long week." But in his eyes, I saw something, a flicker of worry quickly masked by a practiced smile. I reached for his hand. "Dad, are you okay?" He squeezed my fingers gently. "I'm fine, honey. Just tired." He wasn't fine. Not really. Within months, the little slips became bigger ones. Forgetting appointments, missing calls, confusing dates, losing track between morning and afternoon. I tried to stay close. I really did. But every attempt to visit, every call I made, every message I sent somehow went unanswered or intercepted. I thought life was just busy. I thought age was catching up with him. I thought distance was natural. I didn't know then that someone was pulling strings behind a curtain I couldn't see. One afternoon, I drove to the mansion unannounced. The gates were open, which was unusual. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I stepped inside and immediately felt something wrong, a heaviness in the air, as if the walls were holding a secret. I called out, "Dad?" No answer. I walked deeper into the hallway, my footsteps echoing. And then I heard a voice, a familiar voice, but fragile in a way I had never heard it before. "Luna." I turned the corner and froze. My father was sitting on the staircase, one hand gripping the railing, his breathing uneven. He looked pale, tired, like someone had drained the color from him. "Dad, what's wrong?" I rushed to his side. He smiled weakly. "Oh, honey, you're here? I didn't know you were coming." "I called yesterday," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, I don't think so." I did call. I called 3 times. But before I could say anything, a voice cut through the hallway. "Victor, you shouldn't be out of bed." "Evelyn." She walked toward us, her heels tapping sharply on the marble floor, carrying a tray with medicine. Her expression was a mixture of concern and annoyance. She said, "Luna, I didn't know you were visiting today." I felt something inside me twist. My father looked back at me. He whispered, "I wish I had known." I squeezed his hand, hiding my confusion. How many messages had he not seen? How many visits had she made invisible? Over the next few weeks, his health declined in ways that didn't feel natural. He would fade in and out of sleep at odd times. He would struggle to remember simple things like the day or the name of the gardener he had known for 10 years. He would sit quietly for stretches, staring at nothing. I asked Evelyn about it. Every time, she had the same perfectly rehearsed response. "He's fine, Luna. Aging just affects people differently." But something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't just age, it wasn't just stress. Something else was happening. Then came the moment that broke me. The moment I realized just how deep Evelyn's control reached. I had planned a weekend visit, which my father was excited about. We had talked on the phone, somehow I got through, and he had said, "Let's have dinner Saturday night, just you and me." It felt like a doorway opening again, a small crack of warmth returning. But when I arrived that Saturday, he wasn't home. The staff told me he was at a medical appointment. It didn't feel right. So I waited in the garden. 2 hours later, a black car pulled into the driveway. My father stepped out, looking confused, almost disoriented. But what caught my attention was Evelyn, standing behind him, one hand on his back, guiding him like a child who couldn't walk alone. When she saw me, her face tightened just for a second, then smoothed back into a polite mask. "Oh, Luna, you're here. We weren't expecting you." My father looked at me, lost. "Did we have plans today?" His words felt like a punch. His eyes were searching, trying to find the memory. "Yes, Dad, we planned dinner." He blinked, then blinked again. "I don't remember." Evelyn stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You've been tired lately." Tired? That was her favorite word. Her shield, her excuse. But then something happened she didn't expect. My father looked at me, really looked. There was a flicker, small but real. He murmured, "I wanted to see you. I just forgot." His voice cracked on the last word, and in that moment, I saw guilt in his eyes. Pain, confusion, a helplessness I had never seen in him before. I'd hugged him tightly, and he held on to me with trembling hands. This wasn't my father, not the man I grew up with. Not the man who built empires and read bedtime stories and kissed my forehead every morning before school. Something was happening to him. Something Evelyn wasn't telling me. Something she was using. After that day, everything escalated. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to speak to his doctor. I wasn't given updates on his health. I wasn't allowed private time with him without Evelyn hovering in the background. If I called, she answered. If I texted, she replied. If I emailed, she responded on his behalf. The few times I reached him directly, he sounded distant. Not just mentally, but emotionally. Like someone who had been told the same lies so many times, he now believed them. "You've been so busy," he'd say softly. "I didn't want to bother you." I would whisper, "Dad, I always have time for you." He'd say, "I know," but his voice carried doubt that hadn't come from him. From her. But the moment that shattered everything happened one late evening. I had come to the mansion again, unannounced, because that was the only way to catch reality. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked down the hallway, past the portraits, past the library, and then I heard voices. Evelyn's voice. Sharp, cold. Nothing like the sweet tone she used in front of others. "You need to sign it, Victor. The lawyers are waiting. My father's voice trembled. I, I don't understand the changes. You don't need to understand. You need to trust me. Trust. The word stabbed me. I peeked through the barely open door. My father was sitting at his desk, weak, confused, holding a pen with trembling fingers. Evelyn stood over him, pointing to a document. A will. My stomach tightened into a knot. "He's not ready," my father whispered. "I want Luna." "She doesn't care," Evelyn cut in sharply. "She's moved on with her life. You know that." Something broke inside me. "He doesn't know," she continued, her voice dripping poison, "and he doesn't need to." "He doesn't know what?" I didn't realize I had stepped fully into the room until the floor creaked under my weight. Evelyn spun around, her face drained of color, then flashed with irritation. "Luna, what are you doing here?" But my father, he looked at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. Like a fog had lifted. "Luna," he whispered, "you're here?" His voice cracked again like he was trying not to cry. I rushed toward him. "Dad, I'm right here." Evelyn moved quickly, stepping between us like a guard dog. "This is a private discussion," she said sternly. "I'm his daughter. I deserve to know what's going on." Her eyes narrowed, cold, hard. "This doesn't concern you." My father weakly lifted his hand. It does," he whispered. "She's my—" Before he could finish, Evelyn's phone rang. She picked it up, turned her back to us, and walked out. But that single moment, that crack of truth, was all I needed. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong, and Evelyn was at the center of it. That night, I left the mansion with questions burning inside me like fire, and that fire grew with every unanswered call, every blocked attempt to reach him, every subtle sign that she was hiding something bigger than I could imagine. I didn't know the full truth yet. I didn't know how far she had gone. I didn't know what secrets she had buried in that house, but I felt it. A storm was coming. A storm that would rip open everything I thought I knew about my family, and the person who would bring me into the eye of that storm, the one who would finally break the silence, was the last person I expected. The butler, Mr. Hale. The morning sun was pale and weak when I pulled up to my father's office that day. I had received a call from his lawyer, a polite woman named Clara, who spoke with precision and a quiet authority. "Ms. Flores, we need to finalize your father's will. Please come in this afternoon." Her voice was calm, neutral, but underneath it, I sensed the tension. I didn't know then that the tension wasn't coming from her. It was coming from Evelyn, and it had been waiting for me for years. I parked my car in the familiar lot, hands trembling despite the early hour. Every step toward the office felt heavier than the last, like I was carrying decades of unanswered questions. As I entered the building, the smell of polished wood and leather hit me. It was the same office my father had built over 30 years, a place of power, wealth, and decisions that shaped lives. And now, a place where my own existence in his world would be questioned. Clara greeted me warmly, but there was an unspoken hesitation. She handed me a folder. "This is your father's current will," she said softly. "You should review it carefully." I nodded, trying to steady my hands. I opened it, and my heart froze. There was no line for me, no mention, no inheritance, no acknowledgement. As if I had never existed, as if every shared birthday, every whispered bedtime story, every moment I had lived with him had been erased. I looked up at Clara. Her eyes were sympathetic, almost apologetic. I I don't understand, I whispered. Why am I not included? Clara glanced down, then sighed. Ms. Flores, these decisions were made by your father, with guidance from your stepmother, Evelyn. She insisted on these changes. My mind reeled. My stomach churned. I couldn't breathe. She she removed me? I started, my voice shaking. She she removed me? Clara nodded. I'm sorry, Luna. There's nothing I can do. Legally, it's binding. Everything inside me shattered. I felt like someone had pulled the rug from under me, leaving me to fall into a pit I couldn't see the bottom of. I left the lawyer's office stunned, my hands clutching the folder as if holding it tight could bring back my place in my father's life. I walked through the city streets, numb, replaying every memory, every moment that Evelyn had orchestrated, every subtle push that had kept me at a distance. All the pieces finally clicked together. The forgotten calls, the diverted letters, the canceled visits, the misunderstandings. It wasn't misunderstandings. It was deliberate, calculated, a slow, invisible erasure. My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. And yet beneath the shock and pain, something else stirred. Anger. A quiet, steady flame that whispered, "You will not be erased." I returned home that night, feeling hollow, but aware of one undeniable truth. I couldn't rely on anyone. My father had been manipulated. Clara couldn't overturn the will. And Evelyn? She had planned this for years. I sat in the living room, staring at my father's favorite armchair. I remembered him reading a book there, his glasses slipping down his nose, humming softly as he turned the pages. I remembered him teaching me to tie my shoes, to ride my first bike, to stand up for myself. I remembered every little thing he had done to make me feel loved, seen, and valued. And now, it was all hidden behind Evelyn's perfect smile, all erased. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of the empty room that had held too many secrets for too long. Late that night, when the house was silent, I received a knock at the door. It was Mr. Hale. The butler had always been a quiet presence, the steady hand in the storm, watching, remembering, noticing. But now, he was something more. He looked around cautiously, then held out a small envelope. Miss Luna, you should read this, carefully. I took it, hands shaking. Inside was a folded piece of paper written in the neatest handwriting I had ever seen. It read, "You have been erased, but not forgotten. She has hidden truths from you, truths your father cannot see. Meet me at the old garden gate tomorrow at noon. There, I will show you what she is willing to hide." I looked up at him. Why now? I asked him. Why tell me this now? He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. Because, Miss Luna, it's time you saw the truth. And because she thinks she has won. The weight of his words hit me like a wave. I realized then that my entire life, my memories, my father's trust, had been quietly stolen. And yet the flame of hope hadn't died. It was just waiting for someone to fan it. The next morning, I arrived at the garden gate, my heart pounding like a drum. The sun was bright, almost cruel in its clarity. I half expected Evelyn to appear, to stop me, to reclaim control over the situation. But the garden was empty. The air smelled of wet earth and jasmine, the same scent that had always comforted me as a child. And then I saw him. Mr. Hale was standing under the ancient oak tree, arms folded, watching me approach. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were urgent. "You're here," he said simply. I nodded, unsure what to say. I I don't understand. What is all this?" He gestured toward the small shed at the far end of the garden. Inside, he said, were boxes of documents, letters, and files. Proof, evidence, everything Evelyn had hidden. Letters I had sent to my father that never reached him, medical records she had withheld, emails deleted, financial manipulations, legal documents signed by my father while unaware, amended under sedation or distraction. I stared at them in disbelief. The reality of her actions hit me with a force I couldn't ignore. And yet, somehow, I felt alive. Not broken, alive. Mr. Hale looked at me, solemn but firm. "Miss Luna, she thinks she has removed you from everything. But with this, you have the power she never imagined." Power. The word tasted bitter and sweet in my mouth. I had been erased, yes, but now I had knowledge, strategy, and truth. The scales were tipping. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange, fierce determination. I left the garden that day with the documents hidden in my bag. The world felt different, lighter, heavier, dangerous, but possible. I knew the road ahead would not be simple. I knew Evelyn would try to stop me, manipulate, gaslight, or intimidate me. I knew my father might still be lost in her web of lies. But I also knew this: I would not be erased. I would not disappear silently, and I would not let her win. Because some battles are not fought with weapons. They are fought with truth, with patience, with courage. And the first step was knowing the enemy. That night, as I sat in my car reviewing the documents again, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was clarity, it was anger, it was resolve. Evelyn had hidden in plain sight for years. She thought she could erase me, bend reality, control my father's life, and rewrite history. But she hadn't counted on the quiet loyalty of a butler who saw everything. And she hadn't counted on me, someone who had spent a lifetime learning patience, observation, and resilience. The journey ahead would be long. It would be painful. It would test everything I believed about family, love, and justice. But one thing was certain. She had underestimated me, and now she would pay the price. The following morning, I returned to the estate earlier than planned. I had spent the night going over the documents Mr. Hale had given me, each one confirming what I already feared. Evelyn had been manipulating my father's life for years, controlling his world without his awareness. But even after all that, I didn't yet understand how deep her deceit ran, how far she would go to erase me. The garden gate felt heavier that day, not with weight, but with anticipation. It was as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for a secret long buried to finally see the light. Mr. Hale was already there. He looked older somehow, his posture straighter than usual, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed years of quiet observation, patience, and endurance. "Miss Luna," he said, voice low and steady, "today you will understand everything." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the house, then back at the shed. "Inside. Come with me." We entered the shed, and Mr. Hale closed the door behind us. He moved carefully, almost reverently, toward a small wooden chest tucked in the corner. He knelt, unlatching it with deliberate precision, and removed a bundle of papers, a stack of photographs, and an envelope marked private. "These," he said, "contain the things Evelyn never wanted anyone to find. Things even your father doesn't know." My stomach tightened. I could feel the gravity of the moment, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one step would change everything. He handed me a photograph first. I gasped. It was my father, much younger, standing with a woman who wasn't my mother. Her identity wasn't clear at first, just shadows, smiles, and what looked like a hidden tension in his eyes. I looked closer and realized this was Evelyn. Years before she met him officially, long before she moved into our lives. And this, Mr. Hale whispered, is the beginning of her plan. I flipped through the documents, contracts, emails, letters, everything carefully crafted to isolate me, weaken my father's support system, and ensure she would gain complete control. There were travel itineraries, medical records, and even manipulated tax documents. Everything pointed to one thing. Evelyn had spent years preparing to erase me from my father's life. I felt my hands shaking. I wanted to throw the papers across the room, to scream, to cry, to run. But I couldn't, because this was more than betrayal. It was evidence. Evidence I could use. Mr. Hale handed me the envelope marked private. Inside, a single sheet of paper detailed a secret so dark, so meticulously hidden, it made my blood run cold. Evelyn had been influencing my father's health indirectly, ensuring he stayed weaker than he should, keeping him confused, altering his medical schedule, even suppressing certain treatments, all to maintain her control. I read it again and again, my vision blurred with rage, fear, and disbelief. She hadn't just manipulated the will. She had systematically dismantled my father's independence, mentally, emotionally, and physically, so that he couldn't protect me, couldn't remember me, and couldn't see her for what she truly was. Every step she had taken over the past decade wasn't just clever, it was cruel, calculated, and ruthless. And for a moment, I hated her so much I could feel my heart beating in my throat. But Mr. Hale put a hand on my shoulder. Calm, Miss Luna. This is exactly why I brought you here. You need to understand her methods, her weaknesses, and her obsession. Once you know, you can fight back. I swallowed, feeling a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. I I can't believe she did all this, I whispered. He nodded. Believe it, and know that she thought she was untouchable, but no one is untouchable forever. He explained everything in detail. The moments I thought were accidents, miscommunications, or simple distance, they were all her doing. The canceled visits, the hidden letters and emails, the carefully managed staff who were too afraid to speak up, even the legal loopholes she exploited to remove me from the will. Every small betrayal suddenly became part of a bigger, horrifying picture. And here's the most important part, Mr. Hale said, voice dropping to a whisper. This is where you have the advantage. She's arrogant, Miss Luna. She thinks she's untouchable. She hasn't considered that you might actually see the truth. I felt a spark, a dangerous, beautiful spark. For the first time in years, I felt the words revenge stir in my chest. Not a shallow, vengeful anger, but a deliberate, calculated plan. A fire built from years of being ignored, erased, and humiliated. I thought about the dinners she had taken from me, the birthdays, the family holidays, the moments with my father she had stolen, the life I had been denied. And I realized, if I was going to reclaim my father, my inheritance, and my life, I had to understand her completely. I had to know everything. Mr. Hale handed me a folder labeled Evelyn's Financial and Personal Records. Inside were credit statements, property acquisitions, and letters that revealed a shocking truth. Evelyn had been secretly amassing wealth, accounts, and influence for herself.
everything calculated to secure her power and wealth, even if my father passed away. It wasn't just a plan to erase me, it was a plan to make herself untouchable, to be untouchable in the eyes of the law, society, and even the man she claimed to love. I felt my stomach twist with disbelief. The woman I had tolerated, sometimes even smiled at to keep peace, had been scheming behind my back for decades, and now I had the proof. I looked up at Mr. Hale. What what should I do? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, voice barely audible. You wait. You watch. You plan. And when the moment comes, you strike. I nodded, understanding immediately. This wasn't about confrontation today. This wasn't about screaming or running to the lawyers. It was about precision, patience, and strategy. She had underestimated me. She had assumed I was weak, that I had accepted my erasure. She was wrong. I spent the next few days studying everything in the folders, every email, every note, every financial record. I mapped her movements, her patterns, her weaknesses. And as I pieced together the puzzle, I realized just how vulnerable she had made herself. Her arrogance, her need to control, her reliance on secrecy. Each document became a key, an opening I could use, and with Mr. Hale's guidance, I began planning, not just to reclaim my father's attention, but to dismantle her empire of lies, carefully, strategically, and mercilessly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a force. That evening, I sat by the window, the garden bathed in golden sunlight. I imagined Evelyn walking through the house, unaware that the walls around her were no longer her allies. I imagined my father, confused, manipulated, and fragile, but still my father, being slowly freed from her web. And I imagined myself, no longer erased, no longer powerless, no longer sidelined, taking the steps that would restore everything she had stolen. The path ahead was dangerous. It would be painful. It would test every ounce of my patience, courage, and cunning. But I had something she would never understand: the truth. And the truth was a weapon far sharper than any wealth, any manipulation, any lie she could conjure. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. She had taken years from me, but she wouldn't take the future. She had tried to erase me from my father's life, but she couldn't erase the bond, the memories, or the love. And she certainly underestimated the quiet fire of a daughter who had been pushed into the shadows, only to rise stronger. The first strike of revenge wasn't about wealth, it wasn't about status. It was about reclaiming truth. And I was ready. The morning air felt crisp, almost electric, the kind of air that tells you something is about to happen. I drove up to the mansion with a steady heart and a mind sharpened by weeks of planning. The folders and evidence from Mr. Hale were in my bag, each document a piece of the arsenal I needed to reclaim my life and my father. I parked near the fountain, the same place where memories of my childhood and stolen moments collided. The mansion loomed before me like a fortress, but today it would not feel impenetrable. I stepped inside, and immediately Evelyn appeared. Her smile was perfect, polished, but something was different. She had been used to control, not confrontation. "Luna, what a surprise," she said, her voice carefully measured. I walked past her, ignoring the jab in her tone. "Evelyn," I said, voice calm, "we need to talk." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "This isn't the time, Luna. Your father, he will be part of this," I interrupted, my gaze firm. "He deserves the truth." I led her to the study where my father had been resting. When he saw me, his eyes widened,
a mix of recognition, relief, and confusion washing over him. "Luna?" he whispered. "Yes, Dad," I said softly. "I'm here." Evelyn stepped forward, attempting to assert control, but I didn't flinch. "I think it's time you leave," I said. She smiled, the first real tension showing in the edges of her mouth. "Leave? You have no idea what you're doing." "I have every idea," I replied, producing the folders. "This isn't just about me being removed from your life, Dad. It's about the years she stole from you and the lies she's built around herself." I laid out the documents on the desk: contracts, letters, financial statements, emails, proof of manipulation, deceit, and control. My father's eyes widened as he recognized letters he had written and never received, statements he had never seen, appointments and treatments that had been altered or canceled without his knowledge. I I don't understand," he said, shaking his head. "I trusted her. I thought she was helping. She was controlling you, manipulating you, hiding everything from you." Evelyn's posture stiffened. Her voice became sharper. "You have no idea what you're saying." I looked at her directly, the fire of years of betrayal in my eyes. "I do, and now everyone will know." Mr. Hale stepped forward, his presence commanding yet subtle. He spoke with calm authority. "She has been hiding this for years, Victor, but we have the evidence. She manipulated your health, your decisions, and your will. And now, it ends." Evelyn's face paled, her perfect mask slipping. "You can't do this," she hissed. "This isn't over." "It is," I said firmly, "and justice is long overdue." I watched her unravel as I presented the evidence. Hidden letters proving I had tried to reach my father, financial statements showing her secret accumulation of wealth, manipulated legal documents altering my rightful place in his life and will, medical records showing her interference in his treatments. She tried to argue, tried to gaslight, but the weight of proof was unstoppable. My father's expression hardened. He said slowly, voice trembling, I I trusted her," he said, "but now I see the truth." Evelyn's hands trembled. She had never expected this. She had never imagined someone could see through her web of control, let alone confront her with evidence. The confrontation reached its peak when I placed the envelope containing the most incriminating evidence, her direct manipulations of his health, on the desk. "This," I said, voice steady, "is everything you hid from him. From me. From everyone. You have controlled, deceived, and tried to erase. Now it's time for the truth." Her lips parted, but no words came. She realized in that moment that her empire of lies was crumbling, and that I, the daughter she tried to erase, was standing firmly at the center of her downfall. My father, finally understanding the extent of her manipulation, spoke with quiet authority. "Evelyn, this ends now. You have betrayed the trust and love in this family. You will leave this house immediately." Evelyn's eyes filled with anger, panic, and desperation. She tried to argue, to bargain, to threaten, but every word fell flat against the truth we held. I felt a wave of relief, anger, and satisfaction all at once. Years of silence, erasure, and manipulation had led to this moment, and now the tables had turned. After Evelyn was escorted from the house, I sat with my father, holding his hand as he processed everything. I I don't know how this happened," he whispered. "They said I was too old, too tired. I didn't see it." "You weren't supposed to," I said softly. "She made sure of that. But it's okay now. You're free, and so are we." For the first time in years, I saw clarity in his eyes. The haze of manipulation had lifted, and he looked at me with love, gratitude, and recognition. "Luna, you've brought me back," he said, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry you had to suffer for this." "You didn't," I said firmly. "It was her choice, not yours. And now we can rebuild, together." In the days that followed, we restored everything Evelyn had tried to control: my rightful place in my father's life, the assets she had hidden, the connections and communications she had severed. With Mr. Hale's continued guidance, we ensured all legal protections were in place and Evelyn had no means to interfere further. More importantly, my father and I spent time reconnecting, repairing years of lost moments. We laughed, cried, and shared stories we had missed out on. Every memory regained was a small victory, a reclamation of the life she tried to erase. One evening, as we sat by the fountain, my father turned to me with a soft smile. "You've given me something I thought was lost forever. Not just my freedom, but my daughter." I leaned on his shoulder, feeling the weight of years of betrayal finally lift. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Revenge had been necessary, not for cruelty, but for justice, for restoration, for reclaiming what was mine. Evelyn had thought she could erase me, control my father, and manipulate reality, but she had underestimated resilience, truth, and love. And that was a mistake she would never recover from. Weeks later, the mansion was alive again with warmth, laughter, and memory. The staff, once fearful, now treated me with respect, seeing the restoration of balance. My father's health improved as he regained independence and clarity, freed from manipulation, and I felt a sense of empowerment, knowing I had faced betrayal, uncovered truth, and reclaimed my life. The journey had been long, painful, and emotional, but the ending was clear. The shadows of deceit had been banished, and the bond between father and daughter was stronger than ever. As I sat in my father's favorite armchair that evening, I reflected on everything. Revenge isn't about hate. It's not about punishment or destruction. It's about reclaiming what is rightfully yours, restoring balance, and protecting those you love. Evelyn had underestimated me. She had underestimated the strength of truth and resilience, and in her arrogance, she had sealed her own downfall. I smiled, finally at peace, knowing one undeniable fact. I am Luna Flores. I was never truly erased, and now I am unstoppable.